welcome class, those of you who are watching online and those who are in class tonight in person. This night is different from all other nights. And some of you know where that comes from. Yep. This is, of course, Erev Pesach, the evening of Passover. And so we wish all of you a happy Pesach, Chag Sameach, if you are celebrating Passover tonight. We are studying the tribes of Israel. Right now we are on the tribe of Manasseh. And Manasseh is very important for most of us sitting here tonight, as well as probably many of you watching. And so we are on page 6, and we are at note 32. And we are looking at basically the descendants of Manasseh. And we know that one of the descendants of Manasseh, Zelophehad, belonged to Manasseh, and he died without any male heir, but he had daughters. So rather than sons heading the clans under him, his daughters headed the clans, and therefore they had their allotment. They had their clans that came from Manasseh. So last week we looked at Hogla and where those leaders went, and obviously the descendants of his daughter Hogla ended up in France. And then tonight we're going to look at his daughter Milcah. And I said we had a director of the Canton Jewish Community Center whose daughter was named Milcah. And this name denotes royalty. We know that Melech is king in Hebrew, and Malka is queen. Tirzah, which is the last daughter that we are looking at, in Hebrew is rendered Tirzah. Okay. And the same sound would be the same because it is the letter Zadi. And the Thursagetai name translates to Tirzah of the Goths. So remember there were that we looked at, and we'll look, by the way, we looked at and we'll look again at the Massagetai. But this is the Thursagetai. And these Thursagetai of Scythia are also identified with the Terci people group of Scandinavia. So from Manasseh, and then a descendant of Manasseh who left no sons, but had daughters. Their daughters then headed clans, and one of those clans, of course, was headed by Tirzah. And this people group ended up part of the Terci of Scandinavia. Now, an important element among the clans of Machir. Now, Machir was the son of Manasseh. We looked at that last week. And Machir will be a very important descendant of Manasseh. He's a son. And the son of Manasseh is that of Yair. Now, He's also known by a name that you are probably more familiar with in reading the Bible, because Jair is Jair in the King James Version of the Bible, Jair. So I want us to read 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verses 21, 22, and 23. Now afterward, Hezron went into the daughter of Machir, the father of Gilead. So this is Machir's daughter, whom he married when he was 60 years old. And she bore him Segub. Segub begot Jair, or Jair, who had 23 cities in the land of Gilead. Geshur and Syria took from them the towns of Jair, with Kenath and its towns, 60 towns. All these belonged to the sons of Machir, the father of Gilead. This becomes very important because you see something happen here. Hezron, son of Pharez. How many have ever heard of Pharez? Mm-hmm. 2 of you. How many have ever heard of Judah? Okay, a few more. How many ever heard of Zara and Pharez? Okay. Well, this is Hezron, son of Pharez, a grandson of Judah, intermarried with the daughter of Machir of the tribe of Manasseh. So what do you see? It's one thing when we're seeing the tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel who intermarry, right? And most of those intermarried once they got into the land and they settled in the land and they were next to other tribes. But now this time we're going back far enough to see that there was actually an intermarriage between Judah, the tribe of Judah, and the tribe of Manasseh. I don't know what they're doing tonight, but I'll bless them. They seem happy enough. So Judah intermarried with the daughter of Machir of the tribe of Manasseh. She bore him a son named Segub, and Segub begot Jair, or Jair. Now, Jair was counted as part of the Machir clan of Manasseh. Okay? So even though there was an which is kind of interesting. Why is that interesting? Because the father, okay, of Segub, okay, would have been considered a part of the tribe of Judah. His son would have also been considered that, but guess what? Jair was counted as part of the Machir clan of Manasseh, even though he was paternally descended from Judah. Why that is significant is in Bible times, you would be associated with the tribe of your father. That was the lineage. Obviously, when Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then it was Jacob and his sons, and then they would identify paternally. How is that different from the way Jews are determined today? Jewish people are determined today. It is through the mother. It is through the mother. And I will simply tell you that is man-made doctrine. It is man-made tradition. The reason why that was done, they said, was because you almost always know who your mother is. And the mother is, because if the mother gives birth, okay. But the bottom line is, it is man-made tradition. Okay? But it was kind of interesting that Jair was counted as part of the Machir clan of Manasseh, even though he was paternally descended from Judah. Assyrian inscriptions refer to the Iari, I-A-R-I people. They were a people group. And who do you think they descended from? Jair. And they put them, and they said that these Iari people, okay, were there, and they said they were on the Euphrates River, okay? The Euphrates River is located in what modern country, so that lets you know?
Iran.
Iraq. The Euphrates, Tigris and Euphrates. Now, Babylon was where modern day Iraq is. So isn't that interesting that Assyrians, they came down, took the children of Israel, the northern kingdom, put them into exile, and their inscriptions referred to the Iari who fought on the Euphrates River and in an area far, and here's the key, north of the Euphrates. So what does that tell us? There were some descendants of Yair, the clan of Yair, who left once they were allowed to leave, once the Medo-Persian Empire took over the Babylonian Empire, obviously moved further north. They migrated, while there were some, even at the Assyrians said they were still north of the Euphrates River. There were others who were descended, they were in the closer to an area there. So some scholars believe that the root of the name ER, and that should be, that's a capital I, not an L. ER can be found in names, and here's the key, Western Scotland. And so what we're doing is we're seeing how God has moved his people. He moves them far distances from where they were before. Now, as we go to any questions on note 34? Okay, in note 35, we need to keep this in mind because now I'm going to be moving into some Irish history. Irish history is very difficult to precisely nail down because much of its history is filled with tradition, legend, and mythology. You know, we did this when we studied the tribe of Judah. However, it seems, and I will tell you this, there are always kernels of truth in legend and tradition. Remember, we had that with the tribe of Dan. We know that there's the great myth of Hercules and basically that is a myth and legend that came about as a result of the fact that the tribe of Dan, traveling in ships, obviously went into that area, and you had the pillars of Hercules, and they had the legend of what? Hercules putting his hand around the pillars and pulling him down. And we know that in the Bible, the person who actually did that was someone by the name of Samson, who was of what tribe? Dan. So there will always be kernels of truth. So the last and perhaps most important group of immigrants to Ireland before the English and Scottish came. So the last and most important group of immigrants to Ireland, and this is before Britain came in and basically conquered Ireland, and the Scottish came, were the Milesians. Now, they were descendants of Niall. And Niall is also rendered Neil. How many of Irish descent are beginning to understand? Okay, Neil. Okay. They had been, now this is why we're getting some intertwining of some things I want you to see. Neil or Neul had been an associate of Er, son of Nimhah. Now the name Jair in the dialect of northern Israel, that's the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 northern tribes, and of Phoenicia. And I'll tell you as we go into some of the other tribes, you're going to find that the northern kingdom of Israel adopted a Phoenician dialect of Hebrew. And so in the dialect of northern Israel and of Phoenicia, that would have been, Jair, or Yair, would have been pronounced Er. So now you're seeing connections and how Er, I-A-R. So it's not accidental then that the Eari, they're seen in a certain place, and that Neil had been an associate of Er and ends up in Ireland. Now, Nimhah in Gaelic, which is the an Irish dialect. I have a cousin, they have a daughter who does Irish dancing, and they speak some Gaelic. And when they were in Ireland, I told you this, they texted me about some stuff, and I texted them back in English, translate please. You're over there and I have no idea. And they sent me the schedule for when their daughter would be dancing. It was actually a world competition. And again, translate please, it's all in Gaelic, and that doesn't tell me, I can't even recognize her name in Gaelic. But that is the Irish dialect, and in that dialect, Gaelic means sanctified.
Means what?
Sanctified. S-A-N-C-T-I-F-I-E-D. Now, isn't that interesting that there has to be a reason here for, okay, that name in Gaelic means sanctified, set apart. Now, in Hebrew, the name Peresh also means separated or sanctified. And we know that we said that before the Milesians came, so before anyone else, the last and most important group who came there before were the Milesian descendants of Neul. And because his name is also rendered Nimhah, Neil, he was of Nimhah, and Nimhah means sanctified. So guess what? When a king became king, what happened? They set him apart. Or a queen became queen, she was set apart. So now you see that Peresh was a brother of Gilead, and we see this in 1 Chronicles chapter 7. In 1 Chronicles chapter 7. We are in verse 14. The descendants of Manasseh, his Syrian concubine, bore him Machir. Very interesting. The father of Gilead, the father of Asriel. Okay. So we're seeing this. Machir took as his wife the sister of Hupim and Shupim, whose name was Maacah. The name of Gilead's grandson was Zelophehad, but Zelophehad begot only daughters. We looked at this, remember? Maacah, the wife of Machir, bore a son, and she called his name Peresh, which also means sanctified. The name of his brother was Sheresh, and his sons were Ulam and Rakem. The son of Ulam was Bedan. These were the descendants of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. Okay? Now, the Peresh in the Bible, now we're seeing something, is linked with Gilead and with Manasseh. So now you've got another son who's now linked with Manasseh in the same way that Yair was linked with Gilead and Manasseh. So what do you see? Peresh linked with Gilead and Manasseh, and Yair was linked with also Gilead and Manasseh. So now we come to the big question. Machir and America. Machir was the son of Manasseh. And his name is carried on in the name of the United States of America. Dr. Barry Fell of Harvard University has done research, and his research seriously suggests the Phoenicians, Phoenicians, the Phoenicians, visited America and called it the Great North Country. Now to them, you'd have to understand, Phoenicia was along that Mediterranean coast. And so the Great North Country to them would be, they're going out in ships, be the Great North Country. The ancient Israelites were well acquainted with the Phoenicians. And the reason why is in their land allotments, they actually would go up their land allotments, and we'll see this particularly when we look at the tribe of Asher. They were right up against the Phoenicians. As a result, they would they would trade with the Phoenicians. They would pick up certain traits of the Phoenicians. We believe this is where they probably learned a great deal about sailing and ships from the Phoenicians. And so Israelites were well acquainted with the Phoenicians. Now, after the Vikings attempted to settle the land, we know Vikings came. There's history of that. We know that the existence of America was realized by people in Britain. And there was a man by the name of Richard Amerik, A-M-E-R-Y-K. He was a merchant from the port of Bristol in England. And some people feel that he may have, in a way, given America its name. And Richard Amerik was of Welsh ancestry, came from Wales. Whoever settled Wales, he had ancestry there. And his family name was originally Ap Merk. Now here's what's interesting. You say, well, where are we going with this? Okay, his name was originally Ap Merk, denoting son of Machir. Son of Machir. M-A-C-H-I-R. So what do we see happening here? We may not know all of who they are, but they know some of their descendants. And so he was named a son or descendant of Machir. In other words, we're down in the time we're looking at with Richard Merk. But understand, his very name that we pronounce Americ means son, a son or descendant of Machir. Nevertheless, I would say that the most accepted explanation, now you can take that, I think there's some meaning to that. I think the very fact that son of Machir is in the last name has something to do with that. However, if we're going to go to exactly, honing it down, the most accepted explanation is that the name America comes from that of the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, Amerigo, and that was supposed to be Amerigo Vespucci. He was also called America Vespucci. And actually his name was pronounced America Vespucci. And his name, but now we have to keep connecting dots here. His name is similar to that of a prince of southern France whose proper Hebrew name was, anyone want to give a guess? Machir. M-A-C-H-I-R. Americir Vespucci. Now you're beginning to see how things begin to fit together. Americir. Now the term Hamakiri, and that is the Makiri. Now I'm gonna pick your brain to see how much of Hebrew you remember. When you see ha put in front of a Hebrew noun, what does it put in front of it? A definite article. The. So, in other words, the Ha-Makiri means the Makiri, the people of Makiri. Okay? People of Machir. Ha-Makiri. So, when it comes into another language, it underwent a permutation to Americo or Amerigo. And the Latin form is Americo. Okay? So Amerigo Vespucci, who gave his name to America, there's no doubt about it, as you begin to look at this linguistically, was named after Machir, M-A-C-H-I-R, who, according to Genesis chapter 50, verse 23, was the firstborn son of Manasseh. And thus, the United States of America is named, it should be an E-D there, is named after Machir. Now we're going to tie some other things together besides the linguistic and names and people groups. The very name of Manasseh in Hebrew connotes delegated, responsible representation. R-E-P-R-E-S-E-N-T-A-T-I-O-N. Let me ask you a question. Why would that be important? What is our country known for? We are not a pure democracy, but we are what? We are a representative democracy. And this is a fundamental aspect of the North American character. The United States Constitution enshrines the principle of the consent of the governed. Those who govern are held to being responsible to those governed over. And think about this, the very name of the majority of the tribe of Manasseh and the majority of the tribe of Manasseh has ended up in the United States of America. Now, am I saying everyone who lives in America is of the tribe of Manasseh? No, we looked at other tribes. But the majority of Manasseh is here. And I don't think it's by accident when we are looking at all of these names, and then we're looking at At the very name Manasseh means delegated responsible representation. Now, not everyone in the United States is an Israelite. Okay. However, Israelites, and I'm talking about primarily Israelites of the tribe of Manasseh, have been dominant, D-O-M-I-N-A-N-T, in many areas in America. Members of all, and when I say all, I mean all the Israelite tribes are present in the United States. Can you find members of the tribe of Judah? Absolutely. Anyone who identifies as a Yehudahite, a Jewish person, is of the tribe of Judah. Do we have the tribe of Levi here? Obviously. Anyone by the name of Levinson, Laman? I made the statement, Betty Lehman, and that was not her maiden name, but she and I went to Hebrew school together. Yes. Simon. By the way, Paul Simon. I know. I'm too old for many of you to recognize Simon and Garfunkel. So we have representatives of all the tribes of Israel here. Now, the tribe of Manasseh, however, has determined the national characteristics of America. And we're going to look at those. The name America is derived from a Latin permutation of the Hebrew word ha-Machir, which in the Bible connoted sons of Machir. The name Machir in Hebrew implies the principle of selling or of capitalism. And I don't think I have to ask you this one. The United States is the foremost capitalist country in the world. And I pray that we keep our view of capitalism. These things seem to be denigrating very rapidly. By the way, capitalism is good. A good portion of the early settlers of America, before its independence, so we're talking about pre-1700s, and for some while after, came from areas within the British Isles that studies indicate have been populated by descendants of Manasseh. So when you go back, and you can do this on your own if you want to, you can go back and they will trace people coming from obviously the British Isles to the United States, and those areas were heavily populated by descendants of Manasseh. Now, outside of the United States, the nickname Yank is applied to the United States. And for example, again, you would have to, no one here is old enough, but you can still get record albums. Yeah, I know, a novel idea. But of World War I songs. And there was a song called Over There. How many of you at least have heard it? Over there, over there. And it says, and in that song it says, the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. Well, the Yanks were America. And actually that term Yank was even used in World War II. Because when Jewish children, and some of you have heard of the Kinder transport that took Jewish children out of Nazi Germany and took them to Britain, and then from there, they actually were transported to different areas. Some were actually transported to areas in Ireland. And one of the things that the Irish said, they said, because it was looking like there would be an invasion, that there would be an invasion from Germany and Europe into Britain and into Ireland. And they said, well, don't fear, because we're hearing that the Yanks are going to get involved in this war. And the reality is that's exactly what happened. The United States did get involved in World War II, and of course that invasion by Germany into the British Isles was stopped. But Yank, now here's where we're going to go somewhere. Yank is a form of the name Jacob, or Yaakov, also known as Israel. Now, I can prove this to you from what you read in your Old Testament. When you're, particularly if you're reading, you can see it in the major prophets as well, because it will talk about, but particularly in the minor prophets. I know about the minor prophets because I've spent hours and hours and years in the minor prophets, because that's where my doctorate is the minor prophets. I wrote a textbook, a seminary textbook for the minor prophets, and I think some of you even have it. Well, one of the things you're going to see is that when the Lord, through his prophets, addresses northern Israel, sometimes he will call them Ephraim, sometimes he'll call them Manasseh, sometimes he will call the whole nation, the kingdom of northern Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, sometimes he will call that Jacob. And the reason is because the two most prominent tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel were Ephraim and Manasseh, who were the grandsons of Jacob, Israel. But technically, he said, I'm their father because I'm adopting them. They're mine. So many times when the prophets would direct a prophetic message to the northern kingdom of Israel, God would say, tell Jacob. It includes them. So Yaakov, or Israel, and remember, why am I saying Jacob or Israel? Because God changed Jacob's name to Israel. He said, you will no longer be known as Jacob, heel grabber, defender of yourself, but you will from now on be known as Israel, because you have contended with God. And basically, Israel means prince with L, prince with God. So his name was changed to Israel. So Manasseh was the actual firstborn son of Joseph. Firstborn. And while Ephraim was more of a continuation of Joseph, Manasseh pertained to Jacob. Thus it follows that Yank, a nickname for Yaakov, should accrue to the descendants of Manasseh in the United States of... this happens to me all the time, and it always happens at the most inopportune time. If somebody can get right back there, if you're sitting right back there, pull those batteries. I will try to project in the meantime while I do this. I've done it before. I need to. So the nickname Yank applies then to who? The descendants of Manasseh, the United States of America. Now I want us to look at Isaiah 49:6. So if you will turn in your Bibles to Isaiah 49:6. This is very interesting. Indeed, he says, it is too small a thing. It is too small a thing that you servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob. Now, what do you see there right away? Well, the northern tribes of Israel are being what? Related to and reference to the tribes of Jacob. So I said that kind of accrues to them, and actually more, and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. Who's going to restore the preserved ones of Israel? Okay, the sons of Jacob, not necessarily the sons of all the other tribes, but particularly Ephraim and Manasseh. And I would simply ask you, is that not what has happened historically? Yes. And to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles. Isn't that interesting? The tribes of Jacob are the ones who have been the most influential in making a turn toward God. Why? Because those tribes are the ones that went into the countries of Britain and the countries of the United States of America, and those nations, and they have been, let me put it this way, have been and pray will return to their roots, the most Christianized in the world. That you should be my salvation. And this is a very interesting point, which you haven't got to yet, to the ends of the earth. So Isaiah 49:6 speaks of the 10 tribes being raised up in the end times, and they will be. And that is the 10 tribes of Jacob. There was a blank there, and the blank was too little on my page, and so there should have been a tribe, blank. It's Jacob, the 10 tribes of Jacob. But particularly, I mean, all of the 10 tribes, but particularly Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, let's look at Genesis 48. It's rather a long passage. Genesis 48. And we're going to pick up at verse 12, and we're actually going to read all the way to 20. So Joseph brought them, and he's speaking of Joseph's sons, and they're young. And he's talking about his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, or Manasseh and Ephraim. And he bowed down with his face to the earth, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly. What is being said there in the scripture? It wasn't a mistake. He knew exactly what he was doing. And what did he do? He crossed them. For Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all my life long to this day, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them. Let my name be named upon them. So he's basically saying, they're mine. They're going to have my name. And even in the Word of God, they have his name. Because many times when he's referring even to the kingdom of Israel, God uses the name Jacob to refer to all. But because those two sons are the most prominent tribes in the northern kingdom, he just calls them Jacob. Let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Now think about that for a minute. Let the names of Abraham Isaac, and Jacob be named upon them. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know." We already know he knew, because way up here we first read it said he knowingly moved his hands. I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants, now here's the key for it all. His descendants shall become a multitude of nations, plural. The word there, the phrase there is melo, M-E-L-O, goyim. Goyim. Fullness of nations. He's going to become fullness of nations. And I'm going to keep saying fullness of nations, because that refers to something you see in Romans 11:25. Because it talks about the fullness of nations, until the fullness of nations comes in. Unfortunately, that has been mistranslated in our English Bibles to fullness of Gentiles. And it should be fullness of nations, because the fullness of the, because I've heard this, I've heard sermons on this, so I want to pull my hair out. They'll say, well, when the last Gentile is saved, that's when the Jews, the blindness of the Jews will come up. The eyes of their blindness will come up. No, that is not true. That is not true. Because Paul, when Paul said what he said in Romans 11, it was very clear that the Apostle Paul knew exactly what that was. And I believe that when Paul wrote it and when Paul taught it, it was fullness of nations. Blindness in part has happened to the Jewish people, his people, until the fullness of the nations comes in. What is the fullness of the nations? All of Israel. And that's why when you read later on, Paul says what? In that same passage, and so all Israel shall be saved. He said, listen, his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. The younger. Okay, and he also shall be great, but his younger brother is going to become a multitude of nations. That is speaking, obviously, of Ephraim. Manasseh was literally the firstborn. The United States of America has not become a multitude of nations. We are one nation. We've been one nation who has helped others wherever they are in the world. But who has become a multitude of nations? England, Scotland, Wales, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. What? Great Britain. Ephraim. And guess when God knew that? Back when this happened in Genesis. In Genesis. And we have been a country that has said what? We are not, we have said it. Our leaders have said it. We are not in the business of nation building. We are not out there trying to build nations. We have been there, and remember, we had a Secretary of State one time who made a statement. He said, the only piece of land we ask of any country we help is what? Enough land to bury our dead who died defending that nation or setting that nation free. And it's true. You know, the only places where we are today are to defend those pockets. And our family has someone buried in Epinal, France, doing just that. So we are not, but Britain did indeed build other nations. So he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will bless, saying, may God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And I would simply say, are there countries that look to these countries and say, we would sure want to live there? Joy and I were at a restaurant we spent some time ago. I mean, I don't know, maybe if we just look like, hey, you want to dump on us, it's okay. But, I mean, it wasn't that, but it was, they were sitting across from us, we were at a table, they were across the way from us, and all of a sudden, he just starts talking to us. The couple was there, and I think they were a married couple. And so, basically, they were telling us, he just basically said it, he was telling us about something that was going on in the restaurant we were in. And he just said, I'm illegal. I'm thinking, well, what do you want me to do about that? I'm just here eating my meal. And he was saying, he said, I understand. He said, I don't know, I think he may have his green card now. But he said, I came illegally. And he said, I came because I wanted, I wanted a better life. And I went through this and it was difficult. And these people, they're illegal. And he said, and they're not being treated right, but you can understand. He said, you can't fault them, can you? And I'm going, God, why would you ask me that question? My goodness, why would you ask? Golly. And I said, I understand people, and I was true, honest. I understand people wanting to come to our country. And I agree, come legally. But what I'm saying here, do you understand? I do not see anyone trying to get into the Soviet Union. I don't see anyone wanting to get into Iran. Unless you're a little, touched. But people are literally, and let's face it, they're literally dying to come in to this nation. And Western nations, basically, who are the Ephraimite nations. And so he said, they're going to say, that we might be as Ephraim and Manasseh. I can tell you one of the things of which I am most appreciative is a little thing I hold that's just a little bit bigger than this. And it fits in a little case. My United States passport. And there's nothing more, I don't know how to say it, loving that you can hear is when you come back into this country from a foreign country and you hear somebody say, welcome home. I'm proud to be an American. I am not proud of some of the stuff that's going on in our nation, but I'm proud to be an American. And as I begin to see not only our natural heritage or our naturalized heritage, because we have a friend in California who is a naturalized American citizen, and I don't know any more vigilant, active supporter of the United States of America than she is. And so whether you're born, whether you're naturalized, there's something about being able to say, I am a citizen of the United States. But now, not only do we look at our natural citizenship, but we look, wow, our heritage is pretty special too. And God's not done with our nation. Now we know there is something that's going to happen, and we know it's pretty clear in the book of Revelation. But until then, God has a plan for us.
Yes.
And so, the tribe of Manasseh has determined this, and we have the capitalism, and we've helped, and we know this. So, Rabbi Shmai Mikassel Ostreicher, didn't say that 25 times, and I'm sorry if I really butchered your name, Rabbi, but he says that the name Manasseh in Hebrew, Manasseh hints at being second. Now think about this. Why is that significant? Well, because here's Joseph trying to push Manasseh, who was born first, to his father. This is the firstborn. This is the firstborn. Well, his name means Manasseh, second. And God's saying, I know what I'm doing. So the term connotes coming after Ephraim. This one's really second. And building on what Ephraim had done. See, what they weren't realizing at that time is that it didn't necessarily mean that Manasseh was any less than Ephraim. I want you to see something. It just simply had to do with which one was going to come to prominence first. And it was obviously Ephraim. Came to prominence first. But when you understand, it's going to build on what Ephraim had done, and usually what builds on what has already been becomes what? Greater. Every parent wants their child to do something greater than them, right?
Yes.
And it usually has, do you understand, many parents have sacrificed for that, but in modern Hebrew, the name Manasseh is pronounced Manasseh, which is exactly what Rabbi said. And it means to come second. It also means to make changes. How many know what make changes sometimes means? Well, it means to revolutionize. How many are connecting some dots, mental dots now? Okay, no one yet, okay. Manasseh means to make changes. Does this not fit the identification of the United States of America with Manasseh? What did we have to do? We had to declare our independence from the nation of Britain. And that led to, listen, it wasn't that our nation didn't try to do that peacefully, but it led to a declaration of independence that said, now we're going to have to do this. So the United States emerged from Britain, but it was a very different country. How many we're very different from Britain? For one thing, we don't have a monarchy. I probably get in trouble. I don't want to get thrown off YouTube again. I did that once. But I don't know about you, but I'm kind of happy we don't have a monarchy. Oh, yes. I mean, we have enough problems without a monarchy. I'm just going to say that. We would. The king didn't have time to see his son because his son has trashed his family for months and months and months, and then wonders why his father doesn't have time to see him. And there are always, how many know there's always family drama? If you're in a family, there's drama, but how many would like to have all that played out on TV screen? I mean, oh, no monarchy for me. I mean, we have enough problems without a monarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine having a prime minister and a monarchy that you have to deal with? Some revolutions are good. The one thing happened, we were a very different country. We were not a monarchy. We were never going to be a monarchy. So it came second after Britain, and it fought the war for independence to create itself. And there's a feature of American exceptionalism that we have as a nation, or we had, and we have to, I believe we now need to stand and fight to keep that. And that is to constantly upgrade. And We are a nation that always wants to upgrade. And if you don't believe me and you have an iPhone, how many times have you gotten, or or cell phone, if you have an Android, they're always telling you, we have the new one out now, the new one out, you need to upgrade, you need to upgrade. We always, that's our, but that can be good. How many know upgrades can be good? We always want to do a little bit better the next time we do something. Change. We like change. And change isn't always for the better, but many times it is. We want to improve. Don't we want to improve? Renew and revolutionize. We want to revolutionize previous concepts. Aren't you glad that, I'm kind of glad, aren't you glad that after the radio, somebody said, wouldn't it be nice, you know, I know some of you are probably, have never ever listened to programs on the radio. I mean like programs that today you watch on TV that were originally on the radio. And I remember when you didn't have TV. I know it's hard for some of you, but I do. I remember listening to actually programs on the radio. And I'm kind of glad that somebody got the idea, wouldn't it be nice to see what we're hearing? And they did what? That's what they did. They worked on it. And these are characteristics that are hinted at, do you know, in the name Manasseh? It's hinted at, always wanting to change, always wanting to improve, always wanting to do better. So as one thinks of America's history and accomplishments, the desire of the American people to achieve aims beyond the limitations of natural ability. Natural ability, we've always wanted to go. I remember sitting in elementary school and, oh, by the way, let me back up a little bit. Our grandparents lived on a street called Foster Avenue. And next door to our grandparents was a lady by the name of Jeannie Pinkston, and her son lived there. She just happened to be John Glenn's sister. And John Glenn was born in the house across the street down on the corner. Now, I'm telling you something. So, hey, when I was growing up as a little kid, my goodness, Billy Pinkston was just somebody to play with. Until I got in junior high. And the whole school, I mean, this was hilarious. We had a TV set with a screen probably smaller than that in the auditorium. But it was a big deal. You know why it was a big deal? Because the man who had been born across the street was going to be the first American to orbit the Earth. Why did that happen? Because Americans dream that there was something, and it comes from our very name, Manasseh and Machir. We're always reaching. It's in. Maybe we haven't even realized it, or we realized it but didn't realize where it came from. Our history. And we also, here's something else, if you want to know why we have even some of the good things, that good protests and bad protests, because they're all kind of mixed in together, we like to change the rules. That is in that name too. We also like to successfully alter the accepted state of affairs. That's in the name. That's all connected in the meaning of the name Manasseh or Manasseh. So guess what? I don't think there's any doubt that the connection with the name of Manasseh is unmistakable. We are connected to the tribe of Manasseh. The national characteristic of our nation is connected to Manasseh. I haven't, I'm going to have to stop here because time is up. Next week, I want to look at the Great Seal of the United States. I'm going to tell you this. The Great Seal of the United States is hooked up with Joseph. Which makes sense, doesn't it? Joseph, the natural father of Ephraim and Manasseh. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know whether our founding fathers knew that, understood that when they did what they did, but they did it. And I believe it was because there was a hand behind all this guiding decisions that were made. Any questions or comments? Questions? Okay. Clear as mud or a little clearer? Yes.
The last blank on number 47.
Oh, 47? 47. Does this not fit the identification of the USA with Manasseh? And we are definitely, and I will tell you this before we even get to the end. Even though God was basically saying Ephraim would come first. And of course, later they did as a nation. Manasseh will play, according to Scripture, Manasseh will come back and play a great role in the end times. And I don't have to tell you, some of you who've been in the Sunday morning class and what we've been looking at there, it's going to play a role, all right, in the end times. So that, again, it's not that they've just been forgotten. They've played a role anyway, but they will play a major role in the end time. So that's kind of something to look forward to. So we will look at the Great Seal of the United States of America next week. If you are watching tonight from at home, wherever your home is, and I know some of your homes are close, some of them are a few blocks away, and some of them are a few thousand miles away, but from wherever you are tonight, I would love to hear from you, know that you were watching. If you have questions, believe me, if you have questions, please ask them. I'm here to answer them. If you want to give in response to the teaching you've received, you can mail in your offering if you want to. It helps us to put the equipment and get these lessons to you. If you want if you have a prayer request that you want us to pray about, we do have a prayer request. I'm going to ask all of you in front of me and those of you watching from a distance or close to pray for one of our classmates, Cheryl, who is very, very ill tonight. And so I'm going to ask you even to join me right now as we pray for Cheryl. Heavenly Father, we believe in your word to us. And so we know that Jesus bore stripes for our healing. And right now we claim your healing virtue to flow through Cheryl's body tonight. Pray, Lord, that you would just be with her right there. Cause those numbers to come up to normal in the name of Jesus. And we give you the praise, honor, and glory. If you have a prayer request, we would love to pray for you and stand in faith agreement with you. We'll be looking at you again next week.